Hey, this is Matt Ertz, the Madison County Historian. We are still working to document how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted different businesses, places, people, things. Today, we are really lucky to have Bob McVaugh, who is a professor of art history at Colgate University with us, and he's on the task force of reopening. And since Colgate recently announced their plan of welcoming students back, Bob, thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure.
So talk a little bit about the process. We spoke with Paul McLaughlin, I think back in April or May. And at that point, they were kind of focused on the students that were on campus and kind of getting through the semester with the students in distance learning. And they were looking at what they would do in the fall. And now we have the fall almost here. So talk about that process of going from the adaptation up through May and now into, we got to figure out what's next.
Right. It's a complicated process, as I'm sure no one is surprised. But let me try to, if we go back to the April-May period, what Colgate did, and my hat is off to the administration here. They recognized the need to close, but they also recognized that we have many students for whom the option of returning home was not possible, or in some cases not advantageous to completing their academic work. And so much of the April and May period was really focused on two things: trying to get faculty who had developed habits of teaching in classrooms with a kind of close contact and all of the reading of signs to try to cultivate discussion and promote activity and office hours, to get them to adjust to a Zoom world. And it is a difficult adjustment. So that was, they really focused on helping us to meet what was an emergency situation. We had 2 weeks. They extended the spring break by 1 week. And we had basically 2 weeks as faculty to tool up. But there were also, I believe, around 300 students who, for various reasons, could not leave. So the university also had to do all the logistical adjustments to supporting those students, providing housing, assuring that their internet access was optimal. All of the little logistics of running a mini college here on campus. So it never fully shut down, and instead it was just everyone taking on slightly different duties than they'd had before. And like so many things, we were looking for, and we knew we needed it, guidance. We work within the parameters of national standards. We work within New York State standards, and it's been a privilege because New York State is really one of the leaders in terms of engaging this pandemic. But that also means that you can spin your wheels coming up with a very good idea and realize that the certain conditions statewide are going to throw a wrench in it. Now, let me give you probably the most dramatic example of that for many schools recently, and that's I think, very well-considered quarantine that the state has introduced for those coming from out of state.
Right.
Well, for example, when that came out, we realized that we had I believe the total numbers ran to something like 1,200 to 15. That would affect up to 1,200 of our students returning. And that just kind of happened. We were worried about transitioning them back to the campus, but then we realized, oh, they must transition through a quarantine structure, all of which is understandable and laudable. So the summer has been one of constant, trying to be agile as new concerns comes up, but also not to be over responsive to what is the very volatile, shall we say, national discussion. And one of the things that Brian Casey did is he appointed a task force. We have the student government president, the rising student government president. Paul McVaugh is a co-chair. The other co-chair is Jeff Holm, who's an epidemiologist. Then we have two members who also deal with infectious disease from the faculty. And perhaps I should send you a list of the people on it that may be a help to you that you could incorporate or somehow. So two of those, and then three very experienced faculty members. Ellen Craley, whom you may know, is one. She's very involved in.
Well.
Okay, she brings a tremendous regional perspective as well as depth of understanding the college. Carolyn Sue, who works a lot with, she's a sociologist. She's been here for many years. She's a campus leader, and then I was put on trying to represent the various divisions, but also I've done a lot of service in the community, was the mayor of the village for a term recently, and it dramatizes the degree to which Colgate saw this not just as an institutional problem, but as a community problem. Yeah, go ahead.
Did you, so just going back just a beat, did you referenced that students stayed on campus. You didn't have summer session, correct?
No, we did not have.
Did every student leave the campus then when the semester was over?
Some could not.
Okay.
International students could not, and there are a few students for whom there are not viable alternatives. And so I applaud Paul's office, the kind of sensitivity that they bring to that and the kind of energy that they're willing to direct to meeting the needs of our students.
So what did those students do for the summer?
They basically all had singles.
Okay.
They were residents within the village.
Okay.
Many of them became involved in research projects, but some simply resided here in Hamilton, which blessedly is fairly safe and quieter than I can ever remember it. You barely have to look both ways when you walk across 12B at 11 o'clock at night since March. So so that and this takes us to another place, and that is that and so this summer for the faculty has really been focused on figuring out, the spring was just coping, okay, getting through your course. You have an obligation. Then the fall, the expectation is that, you will get very good at this, however you're going to do it. And it was very difficult because no one really knew if we'd try to bring students back on campus. That was by no means a done deal. And so everyone, Tracy Hucks, our Dean of Faculty, assembled a group, a task force that collected resources to support the faculty in and show them the range of pedagogical options so that people could find the way to best support their pedagogical strength. There's no expectation that one size fits all, that's another task force that have been putting in endless hours and creating resources for the community. And then I was asked, and that many of the others that I mentioned were asked to join the task force that would consider in the broadest possible context whether we should open, I shouldn't say that. We would open. whether it should be online or whether the campus should be reopened and try to bring students back, and how that would be done. Now, I know this is very detailed, but there's a third group, which, and we call it the EOC, the Emergency Operations Council. I always call it committee, but I think I may be slightly off there. Dan Goff, who is our vice president for safety issues, is the chair of that. And he works very, very closely with our task force. And that's about 70 people drawn from across a 70-person team drawn from across the institution, which have anticipated series of logistical options. If we choose this, these will be the consequences. We can project certain costs with them, and help people to make decisions. They're the ones that are doing an awful lot of the hardest work, particularly because their job is to give options, right? So they develop something, work out 3 options, and then only one is chosen. And to me, that must be, oh my God. But anyway, I shouldn't say that. So we have these 3 major kind of groups considering, and we spent we assembled in May, working toward a late June decision. Our job is to advise the president. And of course there's, and ultimately the board, and I should mention, there's the board member, who's absolutely active member of our committee, which has worked extremely well. And so we first set out a series of principles that, because we didn't have all the guidance we needed from the state, we didn't have a lot of concrete things that might have guided options. So we said, what are our chief concerns? And of course, safety is critical, to promote safety to the degree we can. But we also believe that there's something very special about the on-site experience of the liberal arts college, that we would yield only at extreme need. I mean, it is our signature. It is what we do. And place and a sense of being a cohesive community is extremely important there. A third factor is equity. Online education is very, very susceptible to the resources of the individuals involved. Our investment in financial aid allows us to bring a wide and economically diverse student body to Colgate, which is a high priority for us. And so Colgate, the place and its facilities, is a kind of leveler for many of our students. And without that, we were very worried about that it would compromise the quality of the year's experience. So that was a high priority. And a last priority was the economy of the region. Colgate is an economic driver for southern Madison County, just as Morrisville is. That we would be irresponsible if we didn't consider that. And so those are probably the principles that guided I would say our initial decision was to explore the option of coming back. The too dramatic of course, there's the don't come back or come back decision, but even within the comeback decision, there was a major dividing point in terms of different schools, and that was, do we bring back the whole cohort, or do we bring back only part of the cohort, with the prime advantage of the second option being you could move all students into singles. So do you basically bring back to campus a group of some definition that would have that added safety of a single occupancy, and also would decrease the total density, or not? It was, I would say, largely concerns of equity that that tended to encourage us to move toward full occupancy if we possibly could. But again, much of that was up in the air because we didn't really get our state rulings on higher education until very late June. And we had made a commitment to our broad community to make a decision by then. So but that's kind of the thinking process that pushed us now. And I'm sorry, I'll keep going here, but I want to credit my colleagues on the committee, and I don't want to make any comparisons to any other schools, but we only supported that, and we made very clear to the president that we only supported such a strategy if Colgate committed at the board level to very, very serious investments in testing. And this is where having 3 people whose specialties are infectious diseases and a committee of 10 was such a wise decision by Brian. And so we have established a testing regimen which includes all students will pre-test. They must submit a test before they come. We will be supplying them with that test because, you know, across the country right now, if you're in certain, it's very difficult to know and predict, and we want the information as close to their arrival as possible. So they will pre-test, and so we will get that information. Then when they, and this became rather dramatic, we are requiring all students to quarantine for 2 weeks when they get here, regardless of their test results. All students were quarantined. All teaching will be online. They will be tested within, well, almost immediately, but within 2 days of getting here. Then they will continue to quarantine through the results of that test. Of course, if anyone's positive, they will move into isolation. And then they will be tested again. So we will have 2 tests in an effort to create what we talk about as a bubble.
Now, when you say quarantine, are they quarantined to their room, to their floor, to their dorm?
It's very complicated. They're not quarantined to a single. And what the regulations permit is quarantining to a double. No one is in anything more than a double. But we also have some apartments. We have, and in dormitories, of course, you're in a double, but you share a bathroom.
Right.
So these are areas where the EOC, the Emergency Operations Committee, works with us to, okay, what are absolutely the best protocols we can introduce to make those situations as safe as possible, and to fall within New York State regulations. And New York State is good at supporting these questions, although the regulations always have to be a little capacious in the sense of different institutions. So almost all bathrooms are substantial renovations are going in to minimize. We've developed what we call a community commitment in terms of behaviors to get students to realize that we simply need to have habits that support social distancing and the wearing of masks, and that these will be inconveniences. And this is one of the things we face right now is they are returning to campus, but it is a very different campus. And so our struggle is to assure that difference for safety, but also to integrate into that difference unique characteristics which will enhance their educational, all right? So it's not just we're draining things away from the campus, we're also recreating, adjusting, finding ways to take the positive aspects of friendships, of life in and out of the classroom. Athletics fell out, as you may or may not know.
The Patriot League shut itself down, I believe.
Patriot League shut down. So what we will be doing there is the athletes will the athletic division is adjusting. They will do full conditioning. They're kind of ready, and will have to be agile on this. I've heard possibilities of, even some of the fall sports moving to spring seasons, but no one knows. So, but we didn't neglect them. We didn't turn our back on them. It's just, and believe me, we tried. I mean, I saw scenarios for how do you possibly make intercollegiate athletics safe, and great people worked as hard as they could, and it's just not viable. It just comes. So you take the next step, which is to support the athletes as they continue their careers and their education. I'm sure I've forgotten a lot of things here.
Well, let me ask you a couple of quick questions then. How are you going to do, so are there students that have opted out and decided to stay home and learn and do distance learning?
Yes, and that's very much an option, as it is an option for faculty to teach remotely.
So roughly how many, what percentage, or don't you know yet?
We don't know that because a lot of the details are coming. I'm actually having 4 hours of meetings this afternoon with my classes to just walk them through some of the things that have happened so they can make a decision with their families. We did poll our students as to how many would want to come back if it's possible. And out of a population of about 3,000, 2,900 said that they were anxious to come back to campus, which was very positive. 80% of faculty have said they would like to do some form of on-site teaching. There's some faculty, and I don't want to say it's exclusively, but if you have a pre-existing condition,
right,
and part of that is age. So I guess I have a pre-existing condition. They're very good reasons, or you have a spouse, or there's some reason, and the university is totally supportive of that, helping people think that through. What are the effects? Childcare. We just got word how schools are going to manage their days.
Right.
So many of our faculty and our staff have to now figure, how do we adjust? That just happened, 3 days ago.
Well, it depends on your school too. I mean, not all of them have, I think today is the last day they can announce.
So there's literally one of the things that we're doing in the task force is thinking about, okay, what's the responsible role of the university in helping and adapting, helping our faculty and our staff. I mean, our staff are absolutely critical here, to adapt to these continuing difficult circumstances. The message from the board, the message from the president is, what we want to do is we want to look back on this coming half year and be able to say honestly that we were aspirational and not just defensive in the face of the pandemic, and that we indeed are, it will be a season of great pride. It would have been, the easiest thing would have been to say, we'll go online.
What about,
I'm not criticizing other institutions that did that. They're always, every institution has its reasons.
yeah, they have to, everyone has to make their own adjustment based on their information. What about, are you guys, and forgive me, I'm not aware, your schedule? I know Morrisville went to a schedule where I think their finals are going to be done in a way that once kids go home for Thanksgiving, they're in theory not coming back. Are you guys doing that too?
We are,
Okay.
and that was something that took a while to evolve to, because the moments of drop off and moments of pickup are for the regional community moments of significant, shall we say, vulnerability.
Right.
So we eliminated midterm break. Students will go home the Friday before Thanksgiving. The last 2 weeks of the semester will be taught, everything will be online, and then exams will be online. And we also have very strict protocols developed for drop-off and pickup, which there are unfortunate consequences for the community, but you have to make the payoffs.
So this is going to be kind of a silly question, but in theory, finals are taken in a classroom with a proctor. You're going to do finals now. Is there a fear like someone like me might be looking through the book to fill out the answers in the aftermath? Or are you just adjusting how you do finals?
Well, we all did that in the spring.
Okay.
And I think there are, and this is where the research and the considerable investment, the group that the Dean of Faculty put together about online teaching, a third of that is our IT staff.
Yep.
And so what they're doing is they're investigating and laying in front of the faculty online options. And let's say you're in math, perhaps, I don't know what the fields would be concerned that would have that.
Right.
But there's an industry out there, a national industry, to try to find software ways to address some of those concerns. In my case, as an art historian and an architectural historian, what I do is I focus more on very synthetic final projects that are written. Last semester I had students creating websites. And so it was it was a different way for them to synthesize the material. And that's what faculty are focusing on this summer.
We've had some fun with this. We've worked with teachers when it first happened, specifically middle school teachers. A number of them had students do projects of documenting COVID in their community and keeping a journal. And some of them got turned over to us, and we agreed we'll keep them private, but they're really unique and interesting because kids' responses are completely different than ours are. Right. In the sense that they're it's hard to explain, but just their response is, you just kind of look and go, man, I would have never thought of it that way. Mm-hmm. But it's a great thing. And eventually it'll be a great source for future researchers.
I'm thinking, for those who look back, I'm sorry, but the sort of public accounts of historical events tend to be public accounts. And it's one of the things I love to do when I'm teaching history, particularly architectural history, is to get the students to get into, okay, how did it affect life? What was it like? Not for the architect, not for the patron, but for the people who actually lived it. So I can think those would be fabulous resources.
Well, and the historian organizations put together, there's actually a thing you can do. We have it up through our social media, where you can go and actually record. You can sit down and record what you think. You can also keep a journal, and we've encouraged folks that are interested to keep journals. And we've said, if and when it's over, you can give them to us. We'll put them in a lockbox, and we'll say, do not open until, 2100 or whatever, and let a whole nother generation look at it then.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing this. The premise behind this is creating, we're broaching, I think, 15 hours now of recorded interviews with businesses and people and doctors and all sorts of different people. It's been very broad, purposely very, very broad, But
Good.
the idea of in the moment reacting, and this has been great because, like I said, we talked to Paul when you were in the first wave of stuff, and we talked to a lot of school superintendents in that really early wave. And I'm not going to call them back yet, but about September, I'm going to say, hey, how's it going? Want to talk again?
Paul would have loved to have spoken with you, and he's right in the middle of everything.
Yeah,
but
I
being
figured.
right in the middle of everything, I get the feeling that he is. He doesn't have much chance to draw breath between 8 in the morning and 10 at night. He's a great resource to us, and indeed, I would say our university leadership. I don't know how well you know Brian Casey.
I think I've met him once or twice, but
Brian he deeply believes in residential liberal arts education. Viscerally, he's not just a college administrator, and it's helped to inspire us, I think, as we move forward. The last thing I need to get in here, because part of this is also planning. What if it goes wrong?
right.
Well, what would be the hot buttons that might signal, okay, we need to initiate a wind down, and if a catastrophe hit, we would certainly. How do we control sending the community home in May? And it was a little bit chaotic when it happened in March. We would want to avoid that. So that's very much a part of the responsibility of our committee. It's literally what we're doing now, looking at all the data points and developing from the analytics team, the health analytics team, and saying, for example, a key piece that may not seem sexy is the burn rate for personal protective equipment. If you can't identify that you will be able to renew what you're consuming, then that's a point where you have to consider changing things substantially. We've actually contracted for the Went University Inn down here on the north side of town. That will be Colgate's. We completely will control it through the year, which is very tough on visitors to the area. And that will be where we isolate individuals who test positive, or in some cases quarantine if quarantine opportunities are not available. So that's the kind of commitment the board and the president made very early on, seeing that if we don't have that, or if the use of that is getting, so we, throw a hypothetical, we need to keep 30 beds in that free. If we dip below that, which was what we might need for a serious event,
Right.
then we need to think about closing. It's hard. It's a very hard thing to do, but it's a critical part of being realistic, because we don't want to have something that loses kind of control. So that's I just wanted to get that in, because some people think, have you worried about this? And
the old adage, plan for the worst and hope for the best. And
well,
in your case, plan for the worst and work towards the best. That's
exactly, you just, in fact, I'm going to take that and record it and send it to the board, because that is precisely what we're trying to do.
I can think of no better time to end this. Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I am almost certain I will be reaching out to you guys again, either during the semester or after Thanksgiving, to see how things go. And because it doesn't seem like it's going away tomorrow, but maybe next year.
Yeah, well, I think we're all hoping for a much better 2021. That's kind
of that might be the biggest understatement of the year. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks so much, Matthew. Yep, my pleasure. Take care.